So yes, today's video is very much going to be a waffly, random, thinky update. Hey folks, it's Finn. Welcome back folks, lovely to see you. So yes, today's video is a very personal update because I want to talk about my own personal grief journey since losing mum back in 2019. It's approaching 2 years now, and I've had some realisations recently which I'd very much like to share because that's what I do, and also because perhaps sharing might help other people who are also going through the grieving journey. But before we get stuck in, for anyone who is new around here, my name is Finn, and here on this channel I share my life in recovery as a transgender gay man. So expect to see lots of content around gender transition, LGBT life, mental health and personal development. If you've been watching for a while and you're liking my videos, I would love it if you would subscribe because it really does help my channel, and if you tick that notification bell then you'll be notified whenever I upload anything new. You don't want to miss these regular Finstalments. So I have been sharing quite a lot of very personal updates lately, and that's because there is a lot going on. Those that follow me know that I'm very much about personal development, personal growth and evolution, and every now and again we go through these stages where lots seem to change, and that's where I am at the moment. Lots is changing, and this is pretty much on the back of having some counselling, which I very much needed. Those who are regular followers will remember that I lost my mum back in February in 2019, and it's coming up for 2 years now. At the beginning of this year I made a video where I shared about how I felt like the grief was stuck and that I wasn't processing it. It was like I had this massive ball of string that was just so tightly knotted and I didn't know what to do with it. And it really just felt like I needed some help unpicking it. And lots of people quite wisely said, look, it's only been a year, Finn, it's bound to feel a bit like this in the beginning, it's normal. And I agree, absolutely. But I also did intuitively know that I needed some help unpicking that grief, because I also knew that it wasn't just mum dying that was in there. It was also the lead up to mum dying and her being very poorly and getting dementia so quickly. And there was lots of other things tied in there as well about my personal journey and my relationship. And that was just all stuck. So eventually I managed to sort out some counselling, and I was really lucky to access some specific LGBT counselling, which really helped more than anything, because as a trans person, as a gay person, accessing any professional really can often be quite problematic. Often my being trans becomes the focus, and with an LGBT conscious counsellor, really pleased to say it's one of the most positive experiences I've ever had in a therapeutic situation, because my being trans was just how it should be, that it's just part of me, so it didn't get in the way. So when I started this counselling, I kind of thought it was all about mum, why I was feeling so kind of stuck, this ball of string. And then as I started to work through this counselling, I've just finished, I've had 12 weeks, so 12 sessions. And as we were working through, I had this realisation midway through that I had got kind of lost in my business adventures. I've been growing a small business over the last couple of years. I've been turning my videoing and writing into a small business and growing lots of different avenues through that. And many of you will have seen my video recently where I shared about the realisations I'd had and that I was just spreading myself too thinly, basically. So at this point in counselling I thought, maybe this what this ball of string is then. Nothing to do with mum whatsoever. It's just that I've got myself very entangled in my business and lost my way a bit, been doing too much, spreading myself too thin, and I need to take a step back. But then I began to realise that actually it isn't just about my business. It's about mum. This being lost in my business is the journey that my grief took me. And now when we think about the grief journey, I guess well, I guess I thought of it in a certain way that, there's crying and there's upset and there's anger, all these different stages that we go through. But I kind of missed the fact that my grief journey was taking the form of getting lost in my business. And that's grief. That is grief. Grief does strange things to us and manifests in all different sorts of ways. And I can see now that what I was doing was distracting myself from the grief of mum with the business. By getting so hyper-focused in my business, I wasn't grieving. And so once I started to take a step back from doing too much with the business, those very first bits of string that were all tightly wound started to come undone. And I've realised that all these different strands are all connected to mum dying, but they're all different strands of my life that kind of got sucked in to the whole situation with mum and tangled up. And so gradually, over these 12 weeks of counselling, I've been gradually pulling those apart. And I can kind of see that I lost my way, not just in my business, but in pretty much every avenue of my life. When we think about our lives being a very holistic wheel of lots of different areas that make up us, all of those areas have kind of been really shrunk down for me, and I hadn't realised how much. But looking back, when mum very first got ill, it was 2017, I was living in Devon, I was really developing myself in learning who I was as a man. I was 3/4 of my way through my gender transition. I was starting to realise I was likely gay. I was being really confident in myself and being a single man and loving that life I developed for myself in Devon. When mum got poorly, it was the right decision to move and look after her. However, what it did do was then stop all of that growth that I was doing, all of that self-exploration about me as a person, because all of my energy went in to coping with mum's dementia, in looking after mum, in finding her somewhere safe to be. So all of that growth of me got lost. And then she died. So all of these last few years, I haven't really been focusing on myself. And at the same time that she died, I finished my gender transition. I had my very last surgery. And I didn't get to process that because mum died. So all of these aspects of me have been on pause this whole time. So now I'm starting to realise I need to pick up these threads of me and restart with them. And my relationship was tied in with this as well, because me and Chris had only been together barely a year when mum died. And we were still in that very lovely early phase of our relationship. But then when mum died, of course, the joy went out. And what also happened was that I became very, very depressed and quite mentally unwell, unsurprisingly, as grief does. But Chris had never seen me like that. And now lots of you know that I have a very, very huge mental health history of being very, very mentally unwell and using very unhealthy ways of coping. I now cope better with my mental health and I use healthy ways. But when mum died, a lot of my old behaviour patterns came back. I didn't enact them, I didn't pick up a drink, I didn't self-harm, but the desire was there. What also lots of you probably realise about me is that I have severe anxiety and fluctuating mood, and yet I look completely fine. And that's the thing about mental health, it's invisible. But I am very good at being high functioning and of not showing what's actually going on under the surface. And so Chris knew I had a mental health history and ongoing mental health challenges, but had only ever seen very coping, sensible, balanced Finn. And then mum died and I was just acting out. I was just losing my temper and really just losing the plot quite a lot and scaring Chris quite frequently and myself. And I don't think either of us knew how to handle that because we were so new in a relationship. I hadn't been that vulnerable with a partner for many years like that and didn't know how to handle it. And I think two things happened. That's another reason why I got so super focused on the business, because I didn't know how to handle this that was coming out, but also because I just didn't know how to communicate what was going on with him really. And what I know happened now, reflecting on all this, is we kind of distanced ourselves a bit from each other. not in a really huge way. I mean, we've still been, in love and having a really lovely relationship, but it hasn't been optimum level, shall we say, because I hadn't properly processed the grief because I was lost in the business and all of that. So over the last few weeks, since having these realizations with the counsellor, when I'd taken a step back from the business to give myself some processing space to realise all these other things, what's happened is that me and Chris have gone into this really super cute kind of early relationship phase again. It's really lovely. Even he said the other day that it's very much like we've just started dating again, because I've relaxed, because we've started to talk about the whole grieving process and what happened and how vulnerable I felt. Conversations are so important, aren't they? That we've just entered this new way of being with each other again that just feels so relaxed and beautiful, and we're both giggling like idiots and like teenagers again, because all of this kind of space has suddenly developed where I've started to undo these strands and everything's kind of opening and there's space to feel again and to talk, and it's just wonderful. And this is why counselling is so absolutely vital, because we can do loads of work on ourselves but we don't see our blind spots, and we need somebody to be a mirror for us so that they can mirror us back, so then we can see things about ourselves that we might not. I mean, don't get me wrong, I knew the grief was stuck, I knew I was overstressed, but I didn't realise quite as much, or how much it was impacting me personally and me and Chris. And as I say, the difference in the last few weeks has just been so incredible. And so now it's really lovely that I feel I'm really back in touch with me and what I want and need again, and that I can move forward now. There's still lots of stuff around my gender transition and younger past me that needs processing as part of what I was doing back in Devon that's been on pause. There's all that to still process, and I'm still getting to know who I am. I'm still very, very young in my transition, really, in knowing the man I am. I'm still very young in coming out as a gay man. And all of these things just got lost in Mum dying. And this is the thing that's the most surprising about the grief journey. It's like when I went into counselling, I had no idea really what was going on. And even in the first session when she asked me about, what is it I feel I need from counselling? And I was like, I don't know, just this string, help. I didn't really get it. But now I can see that it's all been grief. Everything that I've been going through, the kind of slight distance between me and Chris, the distance between me and myself and my past, the confusion and overwork of my business, it's all grief. This is the grief journey. This is the manifestation of my own grief. And this is what happens with all of us. When we go through grief, it manifests in various different ways that aren't always crying, sadness, all of these things. It can be anything. And realising this has really helped me to turn a corner. And now, don't get me wrong, I love Mum and I still miss her every day, but something now feels very, very different. It feels like the beginnings of properly processing and letting go. I miss her every day, and I'm never going to get over it. We don't get over people, we just learn to live with their loss as we move forward. But it does feel now like I'm ready to let go and move forward with this in a much healthier mindset, having the feeling that I've got more of me back and more space, which is just wonderful, really. And I just wanted to share that with you because I know you've all followed this over the last couple of years. Well, you've followed me for many years and you've watched my personal evolution, and then, everyone was as gutted as I was when Mum died, and I've shared lots of this over the last couple of years, especially with my flock members recently, about just how lost and I was feeling and couldn't make sense of it. So to now suddenly make sense of it, I just wanted to share. And if anyone else is going through something similar and has lost someone and their life is looking a little bit messy, that's grief. That is how your grief is manifesting. Grief isn't always obvious. Sometimes we need to pick stuff apart, that ball of string, separate some strands and work out what's going on. And I'm very happy now to gradually grab these little strands and pick bits of my life up that were left a little bit. I told you that might be a waffle. So there you have it. That's this week's update from me. You will likely have more usual videos next week going forward. It's just been lots of personal revelations lately that I wanted to share with you, and I know you like hearing them. Well, you tell me you do. Thanks for watching, folks. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next week.